Hello, welcome back to another Keyframe coach review. I've got another shot here from Kiah, so thanks again for submitting your work, Kiah. And Kiah says, "Hello Owen, I've addressed the feedback from the last review and made some changes overall. I hope the expressions are clear and making sense with the dialogue. Any polish notes would be extremely helpful, especially with the face and lip sync. Any tips on making the face feel more connected would be appreciated too. Thanks a lot." Cool. Let's have a look at the shot. I'm just going to turn off tracing paper. Turn off my annotations that I've already done. Like my previous videos, I've already sketched some ideas, so I'll try and make it as snappy as possible and just blast through everything. But let's have a look, shall we?
Stanley, forget her. That girl will tear out your heart, put it in a blender and hit frappe. Stanley, forget her. That girl will tear out your heart, put it in a blender and hit frappe. Stanley, forget her. That girl will tear out your heart, put it in a blender and hit frappe.
Cool. So I think it's certainly working nicer. The expressions feel a lot more pushed, and I think I get a bit more of a sense of the idea of the feelings and emotions. So nice job. Now let's take a look at a few ideas. So off the bat, one thing that stands out kind of throughout the shot is the eye direction. So here I kind of like that his head is, not facing the direction of the other character. So sort of if we look, here I'm imagining, the character is kind of just off screen in this kind of direction, just past the camera. So I'll just keep that consistent throughout the shot. Here we look like we're kind of looking like directly at the camera here. I'm sure there's better ways to draw a big 3D arrow, but it's coming directly at the camera anyway. So I would just try and get that to be a bit more in that region so that we just sell the eye direction. So throughout, I would just go through and I'll point out where I can, but overall, just do an eye direction pass and kind of keep him locked on the other character that he's talking to, unless there's a good reason to break that eye contact. Here was there was two things. So it was for eye direction, something that can help with that as well is opening the face up and out to the direction that you're looking with the eye. So generally, for example, this end pose here, you see how we're kind of opening up this way with the face, but we're actually facing this way. Now, this is because I drew this, and sometimes, so I drew, this kind of shape in my last review that I did, but I actually think for a general rule, because I find that people often do this kind of opposite way of the direction that they're looking. Sometimes it just doesn't work as well as it could. And I think this is a pose that could potentially work because you're almost like shying away from, you're like leaning in and hiding or like compressing one side of the face compared to the other. But I think in terms of like eye direction, I think it would be stronger if we, open things up. So you would have, these eyebrows in this kind of shape. You would have the mouth a bit more here. And just it would help to sell that eye direction. So we'll talk about this pose a little later on as well. I have a few notes on that. But just as a more clear example of that kind of eye direction thing, I'd probably have the mouth on this side of the face and just open things up as much as you can to the other side. Again, those eyes looking over there. Now, I put the eyebrows up here because I just felt like that would just help with the start. So let's listen to that dialogue.
Stanley, forget her.
Stanley. So it's kind of like, it feels like he's saying Stanley to get someone's attention. So I'd probably open up the eyebrows there to be, like he's kind of looking and he's like, Stanley, and then goes into his dialogue. It felt natural for me to kind of gesture up and be almost genuine, if you're trying to get someone's attention, like, hey, just don't do that, Stanley, before then going into, I mean, he's not doing that exact thing, but just, to really oversell what I'm saying about the eyebrow thing. Like, just if I'm acting it out to get someone's attention, I would never just be like, Stanley. It feels like he's trying to kind of really address him and grab his attention. So I just push that a bit. It would also give you a bit more variation in the eye moves, the eyebrow moves here and there throughout the shot. So here, just the same thing, opening up that face to really get that to be on the other side. So with the eyebrows all opening up to the other side of the face. Then I've written energy as well. So if we look at what he's doing with the audio,
Stanley, forget her. That girl will...
It just feels like there's something missing in there. It feels like he's kind of like, Stanley, forget her. And you just want like a bit more of a tighter head move in there. It just feels like he's kind of doing this quite linear head move at the moment. So if we look at that, just feels like there could maybe be some more texture in there. So maybe it's like a forget her, just something in there to break that up rather than just there. Maybe it's just a small like head shake in there. But I think the main note is to amp up the energy there. So maybe even you could get a little more compression with the shoulders coming up, the neck coming down. So it's more like, forget her. Just something in there just feels a little like he's just turning that way. And it just feels like it just needs a touch more energy for me. And then here's a note, again, like a general kind of overall note. So I feel like a lot of times in animation, I'll see this where the eyelids are kind of buried beneath the top lid. And I feel like he's being fairly intense, and he's definitely not like being like smarmy or sarcastic or overconfident or tired or sleepy, which are really some of the only uses where you would want to hide those, get this clear kind of separation between the eyebrow and the like covering half of the pupil. So in order to make that a bit more intense, I generally like to overlap that top eyelid. I can't say eyelid. I can't remember the word for eyelid anyway. So that instead of, kind of doing this sort of shape and then having this, you end up with something that's a bit more like this kind of thing. And it's just a bit more intense. Just feels a bit more awake and like the character has a bit more life. So generally throughout, just kind of look at points where maybe you can do that. So you see here how the iris and pupil are just a little buried beneath that. But one more point on that is if we go in and look at where the peak of that eyelid is. So it should always really ideally be above this point. So if this is the kind of point which is like the top of the pupil, the top of that, I can't remember any words today. But if you're looking at the kind of side of an eye, you have this cornea poking out, right? So you have this cornea, which houses the pupil and the iris. So what that does kind of is to make the eyelid, remembered it that time, make the eyelid kind of sit above that at its peak. And it's the same with the bottom lid as well. So when you're shaping your lids, just bear that in mind and kind of make sure that things are really above and below those points, and things will just feel a bit more appealing and a bit more believable, and it also opens up your eyes a bit more. But again, maybe this is, I mean, it's not so bad because if we look at it, the pupils aren't being covered, but certainly we're losing maybe more of the iris than we would like. So I would maybe consider doing what I said in that next note about, you know, just opening up those eyelids a bit more. Okay. Here I had a few notes on the lip sync. So let's kind of listen to that. Listen to what is already existing as well.
Tear out your heart, put it in a blender. Tear out your heart, put it. Tear out your heart.
So it just felt like we're maybe missing a few shapes in there, and things are not as intense as they could be. So he's kind of like, tear out your heart. And the lip sync for me reads as he's not being as intense as that. So I feel like this is working pretty well. If anything, you could just maybe get this to be a bit more graphic. So maybe a bit more like this. But I've already done quite a few drawings, so hopefully those drawings will then like blend into the rest of the animation and can just kind of get the ideas for the rest of it from the ones that I have done. But this is just making this a bit more closed to really then pop into the ra. So he's saying
tear out your heart.
Tear out. To me, it feels like you're missing the ah sound. So turn off my drawings. We're kind of going into this, you know, kind of, it's almost like an U shape a bit too early. And I would probably have that as a ra and then come into the ra. Ow. Row. And then when we do an U shape, just push it as much as possible. You don't really want to see any teeth in there, ideally. So it's just a really clear graphic shape. And that's one thing that I really feel like could be pushed in the whole animation. It's just making things really graphic and really pushed and 2D. Think 2D in this. Like, how can I make this much more, you know, graphic and as if it's a 2D animation, really? And that's doing things like pushing the appeal in the eyes, getting those eyelids, you know, above where the pupils are. You know, pushing the shapes of the mouth so that they're just really graphic. You know, how can we push this U shape? So, you know, the most graphic level of an U is just a circle, really. It's just that, isn't it? So then you have obviously a bit of naturalism in the corners of the mouth there, but as simple as possible, ideally. I think I wrote nice here just because I felt like this whole section of body mechanics and acting in that area felt really nice. So nice job on that. Kind of difficult to know what they're saying about that. So that is just a new shape, but just opening up that jaw a bit more. So it's an O shape. as we rotate down that jaw. Then we come back up and we start to ease out with these corners. And then I felt like this is the shape that could be pushed the most. So I'm not seeing any kind of upper teeth there. If you're quite intense, you tend to, you could do a ra, or you could do a ra, ra. And when you're more intense, you're obviously lifting that upper lip up. So I feel like it would be better to maybe see a lot more of that upper lip and just get a much more graphic shape. So you have this straight line of the teeth on the bottom. You have, a simple line there, like a hint of an M on the top, and then simple, and then this side is quite simple as well. And then you're also getting that thing where the mouth is kind of doing this. So you're getting this like nice straight kind of line on this, not straight line, this, hint of a kind of 2D, quite pushed, stylized, drawn mouth, versus a quite CG looking mouth where it just feels like this corner hasn't been pushed in. It hasn't had a lot of design applied to it aside from just moving the corners out. So it really needs to be designed and pushed and made to feel as graphic as possible.
Tear out your heart, put it in a blender.
That's just getting a T shape before that B shape. Before the P shape, sorry. And then just a bit more change in that P. Holding it for a solid 2 frames, and then again pushing this shape. If we look at this shape in isolation, because of the teeth, it doesn't really read as an U. So we can just get a bit more of a circle in there. We can get rid of the teeth. Because an U shape is not really that closed of a shape. It just looks closed because the jaw is actually open. We have a jaw. The jaw is open, but then the lips are kind of. This is going to be a terrible drawing, I can already tell, but the lips are kind of on top like that. They've come in. Whereas before they might have been, this is honestly awful. The lips might have been here. We're actually opening up this jaw and bringing the lips together to create the U shape. So we often would see nothing behind that rather than teeth. Nothing or a tongue. Here I was just tracking the amount of movement on the face. So just looking at these red lines. So if we look at that, there's a good amount of contrast. If I go to here, if I compare that to this line, you can see that we're not actually moving a lot in screen space. And then, oops, spoilers. Where's that final drawing? There. So, and then if I look here and here, we're not doing a ton of movement. So it feels like there's a repeated movement in there. Kind of these sketches. You see how we get this kind of movement over? Boom. And then we come back. And then we come over. That amount of movement feels very similar. So I would tone this one down a lot. Not have the head come over quite as far. Maybe have it come to, I don't want to give an exact amount, but maybe to over here. And then You could potentially not push this over quite as much. Maybe it's just a bit more in this kind of region. Just to make sure that those poses are all feeling different. And maybe here you come up a bit higher and just create a bit of difference in that way. It just feels a bit like from here to here to here to here, rather than from here to here to here to... I can't remember what the pose was. Similar note on the intensity of the eyes there. Kind of see how those peaks are above the eyelids, and also, sorry, the peaks are above the pupil and the iris, and things are just a bit more open. There's a very kind of intense moment as well, so to match that, just increase the intensity of the eyes. And then I feel like this movement, this moment of the frappe, I feel like you really want to come in, and it's nice that you hold that that pose. I would just kind of push it before the big reveal, so it's kind of like frappe. So you get that nice compression, which will then also, if you're compressing down with these eyebrows, it would be nice. That's a nice way to then lead into that big up that you do here. So if they compress, now I do like that these eyebrows go over here. Just got to be careful to maintain that eye direction. But I think it's a nice way to anticipate that big move. And then we can get these compressing, switching over sides so that we open up. And then this is just a few notes, and this is kind of like the main big one really, because this is the big push one, and hopefully this is helpful to you. But if we look at before and we look at after, you can kind of see how we've pushed things. And I'll go through what I've done there to change things. So first of all, the mouth. Again, we have that this line of the mouth being at this angle. We've pushed it, so it's a very 2D kind of stylized mouth. One corner is higher than the other. We've got some asymmetry in there. We've got the teeth being just a straight line versus, you know, being very default, being quite curved in the top and the bottom. So just rotate those. So it's literally a straight line, super graphic. The tongue is also pushed, so it's in a nice appealing shape. And yeah, things are generally a lot more 2D and a lot more kind of simple. If you look at it, it's just simple line, simple line, simple line. And the same goes for the inside of the mouth. And then with the eyes, so I've just opened them more. This is the big moment of your shot. This is the big push pose. So whatever you can do to really push that overall would be nice. I've just got this one a lot more open. It also feels like by doing that we're opening the face to this side. So that goes for, you know, this. If we look at the heights of these, this one is slightly higher. This is slightly lower than this. So we're just getting these imaginary lines opening up that face. And then these are really just pushed as far as you can with the eyebrows. There's a hint of opening up to this side, but I kind of wanted to hold that off until the next pose so that we can go into, just put some tracing paper. So we can go into a bit more of this. So you're not necessarily like going from this pose to this pose to this pose. In between, you're actually like pushing even further with both. So, you know, we're not really truly favoring that big opening up angle too early. So hopefully that gives you like a nice wavy thing. And like I said, I know I suggested doing the pose that you kind of have in here. I just feel like what you've done kind of then suggested to me that actually it's nice to go from this to then push it and go reverse that to the other side and then end on this much clearer kind of opened up pose to the other side. So then all I've done here is, again, simple. We got a line, we got a line, well, we kind of got two lines, and then we got a line. So super simple. This corner lower than this corner. And it's the same thing with those teeth, quite simple shapes. There's a little curve to this one. I think that's just because of the angle of the head. As straight as you can get it. And then the tongue, again, nice and simple, nice and graphic. And then these are just opening up and really kind of pushing that zany expression. I'm not sure if it will work having one eye open like this and one eye kind of pushed up. Might make him look a little too kind of crazy and wired, but try it. You might just want to go for both being open. But if you do, one maybe a bit more than the other, or maybe you just want both. What have I done? What have I hidden? I don't know why that's deleted. Undo. Hello? All right, cool. Well, that one's gone now. Okay, I've pushed that too much. And yeah, it was these. And maybe you have one that's a bit more open and the other one is just a bit more compressed in there, these cheeks. But play with that and see what you think. Hopefully that gives you enough to think about. Oh, there was one thing. I've actually recorded this twice, or at least the start of this. And the thing that I said at the start of the last one was to add some more time to the end. The other version was about 10 frames longer, and I think that's because you did a pose change. You then just cut off the time. But I think it's better to actually kind of stay in this pose where it's like frappe and just kind of sink in to that final pose, and hopefully that will just give you, it basically gives you some free animation at the end. It just gives you maybe 8 to 10 frames just to really read that final pose. And yeah, I think that was pretty much it. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. If you guys are interested in getting a review, go to keyframecoach.com. And yeah, just thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.